The palace was called a home, a two-story mansion with sturdy pillars and wide windows overlooking a lush green garden. Its ivory-white walls reflected the morning sunlight with quiet elegance. To outsiders, the $330,000 house in an elite neighborhood was the ultimate symbol of success. To Clara, it was a monument. A monument to sleepless nights, weekends spent hunched over a laptop, and the sacrifice of her youth to build her startup company from nothing. Every cold marble tile beneath her feet, every crystal doorknob she touched, was sweat that had solidified into luxury. This was her world, built by her own hands. Inside that palace lived a prince named Daniel, her husband, a man with a smile as bright as sunshine and words as sweet as honey. Daniel was the perfect complement to Clara's rigid, work-driven nature. He was laughter amid silence, warmth amid cold ambition. At least, that was what Clara had believed for 8 years of marriage. Daniel managed small-scale investments, work that left him with plenty of free time he claimed he used to ensure their earthly paradise remained comfortable. He chose the silk curtains in the living room, he arranged fresh lilies every morning, and he always welcomed Clara home with a warm cup of tea and a gentle shoulder massage. But in recent months, paradise felt different. A chill crept in through invisible cracks, disturbing the warmth that had always wrapped around Clara. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia born of exhaustion. A new corporate project had drained her energy, but the signs kept appearing, soft whispers in the night that refused to fade. It started with Daniel's phone. It was always placed face down, on the table, on the couch, even when he took it to the bathroom. Once, the phone lay openly between them, shared and unguarded. Now it seemed surrounded by an invisible fortress. One evening, while they were watching a movie in the family room, a notification flashed on Daniel's phone. Clara glanced instinctively. A name appeared on the screen. Sarah, followed by a red heart emoji. In a flash, Daniel grabbed the phone and flipped it over. Clara's heart skipped. "Who was that?" she asked, keeping her tone light. "Oh, just a client asking about a portfolio. Annoying to text this late." Daniel replied without looking at her, typing quickly beneath the blanket. Clara didn't press further, but the lie floated heavily between them, like oil on clear water. What kind of client sends heart emojis? Since when did Daniel have such an intimate female client? That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay still beside her husband, listening to his steady breathing, feeling like a stranger in her own bed. Who was the man sleeping next to her? Was he still the same man she had married 8 years ago? Once planted, suspicion grew fast, like a wild vine. She began to notice everything. A soft but unfamiliar perfume clung to Daniel's shirt when he came home. Not Clara's fresh citrus scent, but something sweet and heavy, vanilla mixed with night-blooming flowers. When she asked, Daniel laughed. "Probably someone in the office elevator. You know how scents mix in small spaces." Then he kissed her forehead, as if affection could erase doubt. Then came the joint credit card statement. Clara usually paid it without looking twice. This time she scanned the details. Her eyes froze on a single line. A diamond necklace purchased at a luxury jewelry boutique in an upscale mall, $6,700, 2 weeks ago, a weekday afternoon. Clara frowned. Her birthday was 6 months away. Their anniversary had already passed, and she had received no such gift. His mother? No, she preferred traditional gold jewelry. That night at dinner, Clara tested the waters. "I checked the credit card statement. There's a large purchase at a jewelry store. Who was it for?" Daniel, mid-spoonful of chicken soup, paused. A fraction of a second stretched unbearably long. Then he looked up and smiled, that flawless smile. "An investment. Diamonds hold value. I bought it to resell later. It was actually meant to be a surprise for you." Clara nodded, but the food on her plate tasted like sand. Since when did Daniel invest in physical jewelry? And if it was for her, why had she never seen it? The lies were growing more sophisticated, more layered, and that terrified and disgusted her. The man she loved, the man entrusted to guard her kingdom, was building another castle behind her back, using stones taken from the foundation of their home. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Daniel said he had to travel to Boston to meet an important client and would return Sunday. Clara's sharpened intuition screamed that something was wrong. On Saturday afternoon, while sitting in a cafe meeting one of her managers, Clara casually scrolled through social media. A post from an old acquaintance stopped her cold. The photo showed a crowded grand opening of a new restaurant in New York City, and there, in the corner of the frame, stood a figure she knew too well. Daniel, not in a formal shirt for a business meeting, but in casual attire, his arm wrapped around a young woman in a striking red dress. She clung to him intimately. Around her neck sparkled a diamond necklace, catching the light. Clara zoomed in until the image pixelated. It was the same necklace from the credit card statement. Her world stopped spinning. The air felt hollow. Her manager's voice faded into a distant hum. The betrayal was no longer suspicion, it was undeniable proof. Digital, sharp, and aimed straight at her heart. She felt foolish, naive. While she built her business empire, her husband had been building lies on the back of her labor. That night, Clara waited for Daniel to come home. No, not waited. She lay awake in the darkness, planning. The pain was deep, excruciating, but beneath it, something else formed. Something cold, hard, sharp. Anger. Not the explosive kind, but the calm, calculated kind. She would not cry, she would not scream, she would not give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Daniel returned after midnight, slipping quietly into the bedroom. He must have thought Clara was asleep. She stayed still, breathing evenly. She heard him change clothes, then lie beside her. The vanilla perfume was stronger now, clinging to his skin. The scent of betrayal. After waiting an hour, certain he was asleep, Clara rose silently. Her heart pounded not with fear, but adrenaline. She moved to the nightstand where Daniel's phone lay. This time he'd forgotten to turn it face down. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. He had never used a complicated passcode. Her birthday. Ironic. She opened the gallery. Nothing unusual. But Clara knew better. She opened the file manager, searched for hidden folders, and found it. A folder labeled My Son. Her chest tightened. It had once been Daniel's nickname for her at the beginning of their marriage. With nausea rising in her throat, Clara opened the folder. What she found inside was her personal hell. Dozens, no, hundreds of photos and videos. Photos of Daniel and the woman named Sarah vacationing in Maui, Hawaii, kissing beneath a burning sunset. Videos of them laughing together in an upscale restaurant. Photos of Sarah standing in front of a mirror trying on the diamond necklace, Daniel's arms wrapped around her waist from behind. They looked happy, intimate, as if they were the real couple. Clara sank onto the cold marble floor, the phone in her hand burning like hot iron. The tears she had held back finally fell, not from sadness, but from rage. She stared at Sarah's face, beautiful, victorious. She stared at Daniel's face, the man she had given everything to, now smiling for another woman atop the ruins of Clara's trust. She kept scrolling. Another photo appeared. Sarah, posing alone in their garden. The garden Clara watered every morning. That woman had stepped inside her palace, walked freely through her territory while Clara was away. That night, in the suffocating silence of the grand house that now felt like a mausoleum, Clara made a decision. She would not break. She would not surrender. She had built this palace from nothing, and she would not let a traitor and a parasite take it from her. If Daniel wanted to play with fire, Clara would make sure he burned to ashes. The performance of the foolish wife was over. Now the queen would take control of the game. Dawn crept in, sending pale light into the cold bedroom. Clara had not slept for a single second. She spent the remainder of the nights transferring every file from the My Son folder to her private cloud storage, then permanently deleting them from Daniel's phone. She placed the phone back exactly where it had been, untouched, innocent. When Daniel woke a few hours later, she greeted him with a faint smile and a cup of coffee, just like every other morning. Her mask was flawless. "Morning, babe," Clara said, setting the cup on the nightstand, her voice steady, no tremor. "Morning, sweetheart. That trip yesterday really wore me out," Daniel replied, sipping his coffee without suspicion. He had no idea a storm was gathering behind her eyes. That day, Clara worked from home. She told Daniel she wasn't feeling well. The truth was simpler. She was making her first move on the chessboard. The first step was finding legal counsel. She avoided the major law firms that handled her corporate affairs. She needed someone discreet, an expert in divorce and complex asset disputes. After hours of careful online research, she found a name: Sophia Reed. A female attorney known for her razor-sharp tactics, zero tolerance for compromise, and an impeccable record of protecting women's financial rights. Clara booked an appointment that very day at a small cafe far from her office and neighborhood. She arrived 15 minutes early, choosing the most secluded corner table. Her heart raced, not from fear of Daniel, but because she was crossing a line she could never return from. This was a declaration of war. Sophia Reed arrived precisely on time, late 30s, impeccably dressed, intelligent eyes. She shook Clara's hand firmly. "Miss Clara, thank you for meeting me." Without small talk, Clara told her everything. The house built with her sweat, the joint ownership she had agreed to out of love and trust, Daniel's behavioral changes, her suspicions, and finally the cursed folder she had discovered the night before. She showed Sophia the photos and videos on her phone. Sophia listened silently, occasionally jotting notes into a small leather notebook. No exaggerated sympathy, no shock, just cold professionalism. When Clara finished, Sophia looked at her directly. "I'm sorry for what you're going through, but now is not the time to grieve. Now is the time to act." Then came the question that struck with surgical precision. "What is your end goal, Miss Clara? Do you want to teach him a lesson or destroy him?" Clara fell silent. She pictured Sarah smiling in her garden, Daniel lying effortlessly. They hadn't just betrayed her, they had underestimated her, treated her like a fool. "They want to take everything from me," Clara said slowly. "I want back what is rightfully mine, everything I built with my own hands, and I want him to feel like having nothing, just as he planned for me." Her voice was calm, icy. Sophia nodded. A faint smile touched her lips. "I like that resolution. Very well. This is what we'll do." She laid out the strategy, layered, intelligent, ruthless. First, they would protect Clara's liquid assets, stocks, mutual funds, moved into accounts Daniel couldn't access. Second, they would gather more evidence of Daniel's spending on his mistress to strengthen their case in court. And finally, the house. "He will try to sell it," Sophia said flatly. "A man starting a new life with a materialistic woman needs capital. The house is his primary target. We can't stop him from selling jointly owned property without raising suspicion. So we let him try. We just make sure it fails at the very last moment." That was when the boldest plan emerged. Sophia suggested creating a duplicate property deed, not just any fake, but a near-perfect replica, indistinguishable from the original to the untrained eye. It would never pass verification at the county land registry. The plan was simple and deadly. Swap the original deed in the home safe with the replica. Daniel would believe he held the real document, confident enough to proceed with the sale, a transaction doomed from the start. "It's risky," Sophia warned, "but if it works, it will collapse his entire plan in one strike." Clara didn't hesitate. "Do it. Where can I have it made? Sophia slid an address across the table, a small print shop tucked inside a narrow alley, run by one of her most trusted contacts. Go alone, bring a clear copy of the deed, tell no one. The next day, using a fake excuse about visiting a project site, Clara went to the address. The place was small and stuffy, heavy with the smell of ink and paper. An elderly man greeted her. He took the deed copy without questions. 3 days, he said quietly. Top quality. 3 days felt like an eternity. Clara continued living as usual, making Daniel breakfast, asking about his day, even smiling at him occasionally. Every touch, every sweet word from him now felt like poison. She swallowed it all, locked her hatred behind the mask of a loving wife. One mistake, and everything would collapse. On the appointed day, she returned to the print shop. The old man handed her a brown folder. Inside lay 2 thick sheets of paper, one original, one fake. She compared them under the light. The paper texture, the ink tone, even the folds, nearly perfect. Only an expert could tell the difference. That night was the most nerve-wracking part. She had to swap the deeds in the safe located in their home office. Clara waited until Daniel left for his regular Friday night futsal game with friends. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but tension, as she opened the safe. She stared at the original property deed resting neatly inside the safe, a symbol of her life's work. For a moment, it felt like betraying herself. But she knew this was the only way. Swiftly, she made the exchange. The genuine deed, priceless, was now safely tucked inside her bag. The worthless replica lay quietly inside the safe, waiting to be claimed by the traitor. When she closed the safe door, Clara felt both relief and a chilling calm. There was no turning back. She had placed her chess piece, a poisoned pawn disguised as a queen. Now all she had to do was wait for her opponent to move and take the bait. The game had officially begun, and Clara, the wounded queen, was determined to win by checkmate. The days that followed unfolded like an exhausting stage play. The grand house had become a theater, and Clara was its lead actress. Every morning she woke up and put on her mask, a mask made of smiles, small gestures of care, and meaningless conversations. She cooked Daniel his favorite breakfast, fried rice with a sunny-side-up egg, just the way he liked it. She prepared his tie, adjusting the knot until it was perfect, then kissed his cheek before he left for work. A ritual so normal, so domestic, yet for Clara, every movement tasted like a bitter lie. Behind her loving gaze, her mind worked like a cold machine. She analyzed every word Daniel spoke, every shift in his tone, searching for cracks, confirmation of what she already knew. When Daniel hugged her from behind while she washed the dishes, Clara had to fight every muscle in her body not to tense. A touch that once brought comfort now felt like the crawl of a cold spider, repulsive. She resisted the urge to push him away and scream. Instead, she leaned her head briefly against his chest, playing the role of the longing wife, silently counting the seconds until the embrace ended. During the day, when Daniel was out, the stage transformed into her war room. This was when the real Clara emerged. Her eyes sharp, her mind focused on a single objective, reclaiming control over her life. She spent hours in her home office, not managing her company, but executing the plan she had built with Sophia Reed. The first move was securing her financial assets. She contacted her financial advisor, Mr. Henderson, a wise older man who had guided her since the earliest days of her business. During a video call scheduled deliberately during peak hours, she spoke clearly. Mr. Henderson, I want to liquidate most of my tech stock portfolio, transfer the funds into the safest money market instruments for now. He looked puzzled. Is something wrong, Miss Clara? Those stocks are performing exceptionally well. There's an internal restructuring in my personal financial plan, Clara replied calmly. I need a large emergency fund. Please proceed and transfer all proceeds into a new account I'll provide. That account is not jointly held with my husband. Her tone left no room for debate. She opened a new account solely in her name, using her parents' address for correspondence to avoid suspicion. Slowly but surely, she moved her digital wealth. Stocks, mutual funds, bonds, everything liquid. She transferred them into a new financial fortress she built herself, like a surgeon severing one artery at a time, cutting off every financial link between her and Daniel. She left just enough money in their joint account for daily expenses, a small decoy to conceal the massive shift happening behind the curtain. Meanwhile, Daniel grew careless. Believing Clara had returned to being the obedient, indifferent wife he once knew, he dropped his guard. He began taking calls from Sarah openly at home. He would step into the garden or onto the balcony, whispering affectionately, assuming Clara wouldn't hear or wouldn't care. But Clara heard everything. Her ears became radar sharp, capturing fragments of their conversations. Be patient, sweetheart. I'm taking care of everything, Daniel whispered one afternoon. Soon we'll buy a better house, one with an ocean view, just like you want. Clara, seated in the living room with a book, slowly turned the page. Her hands didn't tremble. Her heart no longer ached. Only a growing, solidifying disgust remained. An ocean view house, of course, and funded by the sale of the house she had built with blood and tears. Every lie only hardened her resolve. She wasn't destroying a husband. She was removing a parasite from her life. Her suspicions were confirmed when Daniel began talking about a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. He brought it up casually at dinner one night. Babe, a friend invited me into a property development project in Malibu, California. Luxury villas and resorts. The potential is insane. Our capital could double in 2 years. His eyes sparkled with manufactured enthusiasm. Clara played along. Oh, what kind of project? High-end villas, foreign tourists. My friend needs fast capital for land acquisition. This is our golden chance, our path to true financial independence. Ours. Clara nearly laughed. Since when did Daniel care about financial independence? He had lived off of hers years. How much capital are we talking about? She asked. About $330,000, Daniel replied casually, as if it were pocket change. Then he looked at her. I was thinking maybe we could use this house as collateral for a bank loan, or if we get a good offer, we sell it. We can buy another place later, after the project succeeds. We can live in an apartment temporarily. There it was, the bait she had been waiting for. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She pretended to think, frowning slightly. Sell this house, Daniel? But this house... I know, sweetheart, Daniel said quickly, taking her hand. His acting was flawless. I know how much this place means to you, but think about our future. It's not about losing a house, it's about gaining more. I promise I will build you a palace far greater than this one. Trust me. Trust me. The words echoed painfully in Clara's mind. She searched his eyes for traces of the man she once loved. There was nothing there, only greed and lies staring back at her. A few days later, Daniel brought it up again, this time with urgency. He claimed he had found a potential buyer, a business associate willing to pay cash, no complicated process. Another lie, Clara knew, but she let him continue weaving his web until the moment finally arrived. the moment that would unlock everything. That afternoon, Clara was organizing documents in her home office when Daniel walked in. His face was serious, hopeful. "Babe," he said gently, "the buyer I mentioned yesterday is very serious. He's ready to make a strong offer, but he wants to review the documents first, especially the original property deed, for preliminary checks with his escrow attorney." Clara slowly lifted her gaze from the papers. She looked at Daniel with an expression she had practiced repeatedly in front of the mirror. A mixture of doubt, trust, and a faint sense of resignation filled a wife's heart. "The original certificate, Daniel. Is it really okay to just hand it over like that?" "Of course not, sweetheart. I wouldn't be that stupid." Daniel laughed softly, a laugh that quietly mocked Clara's intelligence. "I'll only show it to him. The escrow attorney will just take photos. The original stays with me. It's standard procedure," he said casually, "just so he knows we're serious about selling." Clara fell silent for a moment, letting the stillness stretch between them. She wanted Daniel to feel a little uneasy, to make him work harder to convince her. "All right, Daniel, if you think that's best," she finally said, her voice low. She rose from her chair and walked toward the steel safe concealed behind a large painting. Her heart pounded like a war drum, each beat echoing a single word: "Now." She dialed the combination. The sharp click of the lock sounded deafening in the quiet room. The heavy door swung open. Inside lay a brown folder. A folder containing a forged property certificate. Forcing her hands to remain steady, Clara took the folder and walked back toward her husband, who was waiting impatiently. She stopped in front of him and looked straight into his eyes before handing it over. "Please take good care of it, Daniel. All my hard work is inside those papers." The sentence carried a double meaning, a veiled truth. Daniel, oblivious to the irony, smiled broadly, triumphant. He took the folder eagerly. "Of course, darling, you won't regret this. This is the beginning of a much better life for us." He kissed Clara's forehead quickly, then turned and walked out of the study with light, enthusiastic steps. He had no idea he was carrying a ticking time bomb, worthless papers that would soon blow apart all his dreams. Clara stood frozen, listening to his footsteps fade away. When the front door finally closed, the resigned smile on her face slowly disappeared, replaced by a cold, emotionless expression. The bait has been taken. The trap is set. The point of view shifted to Daniel, driving his car out of the upscale residential neighborhood, exhilaration flooding his veins. The brown folder lay on the passenger seat like a trophy. He chuckled to himself, feeling brilliant. Deceiving Clara had been far easier than he'd expected. She might be a genius when it came to building businesses, but in matters of marriage and trust, she was naive, so easy to manipulate. Clara was still the same woman he had married 8 years ago, who believed every word he said, who saw him as a hero. "Stupid woman," he muttered with a satisfied smile, "working her whole life just to hand everything over to me." His first stop was Anderson Lofts, a modest but comfortable studio apartment in Manhattan, naturally paid for using Clara's supplemental credit card. He couldn't wait to show his victory to Sarah. To him, Sarah was everything Clara wasn't: young, passionate, and most importantly, she adored him. She made Daniel feel like a real man, a king, not just Clara's husband living in the shadow of her wife's success. The inferiority he'd buried for years had slowly transformed into resentment and a desire to take everything Clara owned. He believed he deserved it. 8 years of his life supporting her. This was his severance package. When he arrived, Sarah was already waiting. She threw herself into his arms, kissing him eagerly. "So, did it work?" she asked, eyes sparkling. Daniel lifted the brown folder dramatically. "Right here," he said with a grin, "our ticket to freedom." Sarah squealed with delight. She snatched the folder, opened it, and stared at the certificate in awe, as if it were a deed to the world itself. She had no idea it was fake. The thick paper, the eagle emblem, the official stamps, it was enough. "Oh my God, Daniel, you're amazing," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I knew you could do it. So when do we get the money?" "Patience, baby, there's a process," Daniel replied confidently. "Tomorrow I'm meeting with Mr. Harrison, the buyer. I'll show him this and we'll sign a preliminary agreement. He's agreed on $330,000, cash." Mr. Harrison was a property investor known for fast, gray area deals. Daniel knew him from an exclusive golf club he spent most of his afternoons at. Harrison wasn't the type to ask many questions, as long as the profit was clear. The perfect choice. That night, they celebrated. Daniel ordered the most expensive dishes from their favorite Japanese restaurant. They opened a bottle of fine wine, again charged to Clara's credit card. They talked endlessly about what they'd do with the money. Sarah had already made a list: a Hermes bag, a brand new sports car, and of course, a designer wedding dress for their ceremony in Paris. "We'll get married in front of the Eiffel Tower," she said dreamily. "I'll wear a white gown with a train so long it touches the ground. Then we'll tour Europe for 3 months. No more worrying about money." Daniel gazed at Sarah's beautiful, excited face. This was the life he wanted, a life without Clara looming over him, a life where he was the source of luxury. He saw himself as a hero rescuing a princess from mediocrity, carrying her into a palace. He had no idea he was the dragon trying to steal treasure from the true queen. The next day, brimming with confidence, Daniel met Mr. Harrison in the lobby of a five-star hotel in New York City. He wore his best suit, determined to look like a successful businessman on equal footing. "Good afternoon, Mr. Daniel," Harrison greeted him, a heavy-set man in his 50s wearing a flashy gold watch. "So, did you bring the documents?" "Of course," Daniel replied, handing over copies of the forged certificate. "These are for your review. I'm keeping the original for now." Harrison glanced at them briefly. He wasn't concerned with details. His escrow attorney would handle verification later. "Looks fine," Harrison said. "My team will prepare the purchase binding agreement. We'll sign it the day after tomorrow. Once it's signed, I'll transfer a $33,000 down payment to your account. The rest will be paid at closing, after all documents are verified by the escrow attorney and the county land registry." Daniel's heart soared. $33,000, soon to be in his personal account, a secret account he'd opened without Clara's knowledge. "Agreed," Daniel said, shaking Harrison's hand firmly. 2 days later, they met again at Harrison's office. The agreement was ready. Daniel skimmed it, far too excited to care about legal clauses. All he saw was the number $330,000 and his name listed as the seller. With hands trembling in anticipation, he signed. Moments later, his phone buzzed. $33,000 had been transferred into his account. The feeling was undescribable. Daniel felt like a god. He had succeeded. He had beaten Clara. He had won the game. He immediately called Sarah. "It's in, baby. The money's already transferred. $33,000 is in our hands," he shouted into the phone, unable to contain his excitement. "Really?" Sarah shrieked on the other end. "Oh my God, I'm going straight to the mall right now. There's a bag I've had my eye on since yesterday." That night marked the peak of their celebration. Daniel took Sarah to one of the most exclusive rooftop bars atop a Manhattan skyscraper. They drank the most expensive champagne, gazing down at the glittering lights of New York City from above. Daniel felt like he was standing on top of the world. "This is just the beginning, baby," he said, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist. "When the remaining $300,000 is released next week, the entire world will belong to us. No one will ever look down on me again. No one will ever call me Clara's husband again." Sarah looked at him with pure admiration. "You really are the best, Daniel. My king." They clinked their glasses. The crystal chimed softly in the night air, sounding like a bell of victory to them. But to the universe, that sound was the toll of a bell announcing the beginning of a devastating downfall. They were dancing joyfully on a thin glass floor, unaware that beneath it, Clara was holding a massive hammer, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter everything into pieces. Their false victory tasted incredibly sweet, only to make the bitterness of their eventual defeat many times more painful. A full week passed after Daniel received the $33,000 down payment. For Daniel, it was the most beautiful week of his life. The money felt like it truly belonged to him, not like something born from Clara's years of sweat and sacrifice. He and Sarah spent it without a second thought. They dined at the most expensive restaurants, shopped at luxury boutiques, and even placed a deposit on a bright red sports car. Every swipe of his debit card from the secret account felt like a declaration of independence. Daniel's ego swelled to uncontrollable levels. He felt untouchable, invincible. The signing of the property sale deed before the escrow attorney was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. That meant tomorrow, the remaining $330,000 would be transferred into his account. Tonight was the last night he would share a roof with Clara. Tonight was execution night, the night he would drive her out of the palace he was about to sell. In his mind, the scenario was already perfect. Fast, brutal, merciless. He wanted to see Clara's face break. He wanted to savor the moment when the woman who had always stood above him would finally kneel and beg. The satisfaction of that revenge, to him, was almost as sweet as the money itself. That afternoon, he withdrew $330 in cash, an amount chosen deliberately. Enough to rent a tiny, miserable apartment for a month, but far too little to do anything else. It was his final insult, a symbol of how little he valued Clara now. He placed the bills into a plain white envelope, severance pay for 8 years of marriage. He arrived home just as the sun was beginning to set. The orange glow in the sky seemed like a dramatic backdrop for the performance he was about to begin. He found Clara in the side garden, gently watering her beloved collection of moon orchids with a small hose. She looked calm, peaceful, wearing a simple house dress, her hair tied back casually. For some reason, the sight only fueled Daniel's anger. How dare this woman feel at peace in the house that would soon no longer be hers? He walked toward her, his footsteps heavy on the perfectly manicured grass. He stopped a few steps behind her, allowing his presence to be felt before he spoke. Clara turned around with a small smile forming when she saw him. "You're home already?" she asked softly. Daniel didn't return the smile. His face was cold, stone-like. He looked her up and down with open contempt. Clara's smile slowly faded, replaced by confusion. She turned off the water. "What's wrong, Daniel? You look very serious." This was the moment. Daniel pulled the white envelope from his pocket. With a rough flick of his wrist, he threw it to the ground near Clara's feet, clad only in house sandals. The envelope landed softly, but it felt like an explosion in the silence of the evening. Clara's eyes widened. "Daniel, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Get out of this house," Daniel barked. His voice echoed through the quiet garden. "This house is sold. Starting tomorrow, it no longer belongs to you." Clara froze, her face drained of color, as if struck by lightning. She stared at him in disbelief, her eyes filling with tears. "What do you mean, sold? How could you sell it without telling me?" Daniel let out a cold, mocking laugh, filled with triumph and cruelty. "Why would I tell you? So you could sabotage my plans? I'm not that stupid. I'm sick of living in your shadow. I want to start a new life with my own money and with a woman who actually loves me." Each word lashed her like a whip. Clara staggered back a step, her body shaking violently. Another woman?" she whispered through sobs. "So my suspicions all this time were true?" "Of course they were," Daniel replied, savoring the moment. "Her name is Sarah. She's beautiful, she admires me, and she's not too busy chasing a career to remember how to be a wife." The money from this house will be used to marry her. I'll live happily with her, far away from you." Tears finally streamed down Clara's face. She looked like a woman whose entire world had shattered. The sight filled Daniel with immense satisfaction. This was what he wanted, to see the proud queen broken, crying at his feet. "You're cruel, Daniel. You're truly cruel," Clara whispered through her sobs. "I don't care," Daniel said coldly. He pointed at the envelope with his chin. "Take it. There's $300 inside, enough for you to rent a filthy little place and start your new life as a nobody. Consider it my mercy," he sneered. "Now pack your worthless belongings and leave. You have 1 hour. After that, I don't want to see your face in this house again." Clara stared at the envelope, then back at Daniel's expressionless face. Pain, betrayal, despair. All of it was written clearly across her features. Trembling, she slowly crouched down and picked up the envelope. Her fingers shook as she held it. She stood up and hugged it tightly to her chest, as if it were the only thing she owned in the world. She said nothing. Only broken sobs escaped her lips. She turned and staggered back into the house. Daniel watched her go, a victorious smile spreading across his face. Perfect. Everything had gone better than he had imagined. No resistance, no angry shouting, only the tears of a defeated woman. He felt powerful, like the absolute winner. He pulled out his phone and texted Sarah. "It's done. The witch is gone from the palace. Tomorrow, the palace is ours." He waited on the front terrace, giving Clara time to pack. About 45 minutes later, Clara walked out the front door carrying only a small handbag. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying. She walked past Daniel without looking at him, unable to bear the sight of the man who had destroyed her. Daniel watched her as she passed the gate and disappeared around the corner of the street. The gate closed automatically behind her. Daniel was alone. He took a deep breath, inhaling the air of freedom. For now, the house was entirely his. He stepped inside feeling like a king who had just reclaimed his throne. It was over. Clara was out of his life. Tomorrow, he would be a millionaire. His new life was about to begin. Inside the house, Clara did not stagger anymore. The moment Daniel closed the front door, her sobbing stopped instantly. The trembling vanished. She straightened her back and walked calmly towards the living room, her steps steady and controlled. The performance was over. The tears on her cheeks were no longer tears of sorrow, only the fading remnants of a grand performance. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, not with the fragile motion, but with a firm, decisive stroke that erased every trace of weakness. She sat down on the plush sofa she had bought with her very first performance bonus. On the glass table in front of her lay the white envelope containing $300. She stared at the bills with a cold, hollow gaze. $300. That was the price Daniel assigned to 8 years of marriage, to a house worth $330,000, to a lifetime of work and sacrifice. The insult was so deep, so precise, it was almost comical. A small laugh escaped her lips, dry, hollow, completely devoid of humor. The expression of a broken, desperate woman vanished without a trace. The face now staring forward was that of a general on the eve of a great war, calm, focused, lethal. She reached into her pocket and took out her phone. It was time. Time to unleash the storm. The performance was over. The slaughter was about to begin. The silence enveloping the luxury home no longer felt suffocating. To Clara, it was the vacuum before a massive explosion, a blank canvas upon which she would paint Daniel's destruction. She glanced once more at the envelope on the table, no longer seeing it as an insult, but the final fuel needed to ignite her revenge into a perfect blaze. There was no doubt left, no lingering pain, only focus, cold and razor sharp. She took a deep breath and opened her contact list. Her fingers moved with steady precision. The first call was the most important. She tapped Sophia Reed, attorney. The phone rang twice before being answered. Sophia here? Sophia, this is Clara, she said calmly, her voice a stark contrast to the storm she had just endured. He's gone. Execute everything. Now. There were no questions, no small talk. Sophia was a professional. She understood what an instruction meant. Understood, Clara, Sophia replied. The divorce filing will be submitted tomorrow morning at exactly 9 a.m., the moment the courthouse opens. The request to freeze all jointly held assets under Daniel Carter's name will be sent tonight to all relevant institutions via our firm's official channels, along with the power of attorney you signed. We will also prepare a preliminary report regarding attempted asset sale fraud. There was a brief pause on the line. You did your part perfectly. Leave the rest to us. Thank you, Sophia, Clara replied. Take care of yourself, Clara, Sophia said before hanging up. Tonight is the final night of your old life. Clara set the phone down. One chess piece had moved. The legal machine was now in motion. Next, finance. Her second call went to her private number of her senior private banking manager, Mr. Harrison, a man she trusted completely. Good evening, Miss Carter, he greeted formally. Good evening, Mr. Harrison. I hope I'm not disturbing you, Clara said evenly. I need to activate a security protocol we discussed previously. Proceed. Activate Protocol Winter. There was a brief silence on the line. Protocol Winter, their emergency code for extreme situations, hostile takeovers, corporate sabotage, or, as in this case, financial betrayal. It granted her immediate authority to freeze all joint banking facilities connected to any joint accounts or accessible by Daniel. Protocol Winter acknowledged and confirmed, Miss Carter. All joint accounts, supplementary credit cards under Mr. Daniel Carter's name, and all related credit facilities will be frozen within the next 5 minutes. He will be unable to withdraw, transfer, or make any payments effective immediately. Do you have any further instructions? No, that will be all for now. Thank you for your efficiency. Anytime, Miss Carter, we will safeguard your assets. Before ending the call. 2 pillars of Daniel's world, law and finance, had just had their foundations quietly demolished. But there was one final pillar left, the most symbolic of all. This house was his kingdom, and she would not allow him to even imagine setting foot in it again. Her third call was to a 24-hour emergency locksmith service. Good evening. I need an immediate full lock replacement for the entire house. Front door, back door, side entrance, and gate. I want the most secure system you have, non-duplicable. Can you send technicians now? 1 hour later, a van pulled up in front of the house. 2 technicians stepped out and got to work with professional efficiency. The deafening sound of drills tearing through wood and metal filled the air. To Clara, it sounded like music. It was the sound of Daniel's existence being forcibly erased from her home. The dismantling of the old locks was the sound of the past being discarded. While they worked, Clara did not remain idle. She went upstairs to the master bedroom. She opened the massive walk-in closet. On one side, her work clothes, perfectly organized. On the other, Daniel's designer shirts, tailored suits, and casual luxury wear, all bought with her money. Without emotion or hesitation, she yanked his clothes from the hangers and threw them on the bed. Wrinkled, damaged, she didn't care. She opened drawers, emptied out his watches, belts, and accessories. In the bathroom, she swept all of his toiletries into a large trash bag. Cologne, hair gel, toothbrush, everything. She moved like a cleansing machine, sterilizing every corner of the house from his presence. Photos of Daniel on the nightstand were removed from their frames and torn cleanly in half before being tossed onto the pile. Soon, all of Daniel's belongings formed a mountain on the bed. Clara retrieved the largest black trash bags from storage and stuffed everything inside, tying them shut tightly. There was no trace of Daniel Carter left in her bedroom. The space felt larger, cleaner, the air lighter. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Daniel. He was calling to confirm that his pathetic wife had truly disappeared. Clara stared at the name with icy detachment and rejected the call. It rang again. Rejected. A message followed. "Don't bother calling me to beg. It's too late." Clara smiled faintly. How arrogant. With cold fingers, she typed a message she had prepared long ago. But instead of replying, she sent it as a new message, ensuring the notification would strike harder. "Welcome to the hell you created yourself." She hit send. Then she dragged the trash bags containing Daniel's life to the front door. When the technicians finished, they handed her a new set of keys, modern, heavy, solid in her palm. "All done, ma'am. This is the latest system. Keys can only be duplicated using this ownership card," one technician explained. "Thank you." Clara paid them promptly. After they left, she closed the front door. She locked it. The click of the new lock sounded firm, final. She stood alone in her reclaimed palace. She walked toward the large living room window and gazed at the distant lights of New York City. She felt no sadness, no joy, only emptiness. But it was a good emptiness, clean, open, ready to be filled with something new. The storm had been unleashed. Now she would simply stand at its calm center and wait for the news of destruction to arrive from every direction. Daniel woke up in Sarah's apartment feeling extraordinary. Sunlight streamed through the window like a coronation blessing. Today, he believed, he would officially become a millionaire. He stretched contentedly in bed, gazing at Sarah, still asleep beside him. His mind drifted to Clara's face from the afternoon before, shattered, streaked with tears. The image filled him with a heady rush of triumph and superiority. He had won. "Darling, wake up," he whispered, kissing Sarah's shoulder. "Today's a big day. We should celebrate with a proper breakfast." They decided on a luxury 5-star hotel cafe, famous for its lavish brunch. Daniel walked in with arrogant confidence, ordering the most expensive items without hesitation: champagne, eggs Benedict with smoked salmon, and an assortment of beautifully crafted pastries. This, he believed, was the lifestyle he deserved. When the bill arrived, he smoothly pulled out his sleek black credit card and handed it to the waiter. The moment felt cinematic, perfect, until it wasn't. A few minutes later, the waiter returned, his expression awkward. "I'm very sorry, sir. Your card was declined." Daniel frowned. "Declined? That's impossible. Try again." The waiter did. Same result. Sarah's irritation was now visible. Nearby guests began to glance over. A creeping shame wrapped around Daniel's chest. "Must be a network issue. Use my debit card," he said, forcing calm. In the hotel lobby, he inserted the card, entered his PIN, selected the maximum amount. The machine whirred, then stopped. "Transaction cannot be processed. Please contact your bank." Panic seized him. He tried the credit card next. Same result. Every financial access point had been sealed shut. He returned to the table pale-faced. Sarah stared at him suspiciously. "What's going on?" I don't know. All my cards are malfunctioning," Daniel said, his voice tight. In the end, Sarah paid the bill with her own card, muttering under her breath about how humiliating the whole thing was. On the drive to the escrow office, Daniel repeatedly tried calling customer service, only to be met with useless automated responses. Then it hit him. A text from Clara the night before, after he'd thrown her out. "Welcome to the hell you created for yourself." He'd dismissed it as emotional bitterness from a defeated woman. Now it sounded like a declaration of war. Could Clara have done something? Blocking cards was childish, and Clara wasn't childish. He shook the thought away. What mattered was the $300,000 waiting for him. Once the funds cleared, this banking issue would be irrelevant. At the downtown New York City building, Daniel straightened his suit and stepped inside, radiating the confidence of a soon-to-be millionaire. Mr. Harrison was already there, along with the escrow attorney, Miss Linda Parker, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s. "Good afternoon, Mr. Daniel," she said briskly. "Please have a seat. May I see the original property certificate and your ID?" Suppressing a tremor, Daniel handed over the documents. The folder felt unnaturally heavy in his hands, as if his entire fate rested on those papers. Miss Parker glanced at the certificate, then set it beside her computer. "Before we proceed with signing the sale agreement, I'll run a final verification through the county land registry system," she explained. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. Silence filled the room, broken only by typing and the hum of air conditioning. Daniel held his breath. Mr. Harrison casually scrolled on his phone. Then Miss Parker stopped. She frowned at the screen, typed again. Her expression shifted from confusion to sharp severity. She looked up at Daniel. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniel. We have a serious problem." His heart clenched. "What? What problem?" She rotated the monitor toward them. On the screen was the official registry record, the legal owners listed as Clara Whitman and Daniel Carter, but the serial number, issue date, and physical details didn't match the document on the desk. "The certificate you provided," Miss Parker said slowly, "is forged." The word detonated in his head. Forged? Impossible. Clara had taken it from the safe. The paper, the seals, everything looked real. Mr. Harrison shot up from his chair, his face flushed with rage. "What? So I've been scammed?" "This constitutes falsification of government documents," Miss Parker said flatly, "a serious criminal offense." Daniel couldn't speak. He stared at the paper, then at Mr. Harrison's fury, then back at the attorney's icy gaze. This must be a mistake. I swear I didn't know." "Didn't know?" Mr. Harrison shouted, jabbing a finger at him. "You think I'm an idiot? I gave you $33,000 down payment. Return it now, or I'm calling the police." Later, standing outside amid the roar of New York City traffic, Daniel felt as though his life had collapsed into static noise. An email from Clara's lawyer burned into his phone screen. Divorce filing, asset freeze, compensation claims, adultery, fraud. Clara wasn't taking revenge. She was carrying out a perfectly executed legal annihilation. Fear replaced the arrogance he'd felt that morning. He was alone, broke, hunted. Only one name came to mind: Sarah. He needed her comfort, her reassurance. He imagined telling her everything, painting Clara as a cold-hearted monster. Sarah loved him, not his money. At least, that's what he believed. He called her immediately. "Sarah, it's bad, really bad," he said as soon as she answered. "Oh, worse than that embarrassing brunch?" she replied sharply. "This is serious. The house sale failed," Daniel whispered. "The certificate was fake. Clara set me up. She froze all my accounts, filed for divorce. I have nothing left. Mr. Harrison wants his $33,000 back and is threatening to go to the police." Silence hung on the line. A long silence stretched on the other end of the line. A silence far more terrifying than screaming. Daniel waited anxiously. He needed to hear Sarah's voice, something to calm him. "Wait," she finally said. When she spoke again, her voice was different, flat, cold. "So you're saying there's no $330,000? "Yes, but—" "So there's no new house, no sports car, no wedding in Paris?" Sarah cut in sharply. "Sarah, listen to me. This is all Clara's doing. She's the villain here. We have to face this together. I need you right now. Please." There was a pause. "I'll be waiting at my apartment," Sarah said at last. "Come here. Now." She hung up. A small spark of hope flickered in Daniel's chest. She wanted him to come. That meant she still cared. She would help him figure this out. With the last of his cash, Daniel hailed a taxi and headed to Sarah's apartment, the only safe harbor he believed he still had in the middle of this storm. But when he arrived, what greeted him was not a warm embrace. The apartment door was already open. Sarah stood there with her arms crossed. Her face showed no sympathy, no concern, only anger and undisguised disgust. At her feet lay a suitcase and a backpack. Daniel recognized them instantly. They were his. "Sarah, what is this?" he asked, confused. "What do you mean, what is this?" she snapped. "I've heard everything. You didn't just fail, you an absolute idiot. Getting played by your own wife like that? And you think I'd stay with a man like you?" Daniel's heart sank. "But you said you loved me. We planned a future together." Sarah laughed, short, sharp, mocking. "A future? What future can you offer now, Daniel? Living in a cramped rental, drowning in debt, eating plain rice with salt? I'm not that stupid. My plan was a luxury life with $330,000, not poverty with a broke loser." Every word struck him like a slap. "So this was all about money?" he asked quietly, a bitter truth he'd always known but refused to accept. "Of course it was. You think I was genuinely charmed by your cheap sweet talk? I stayed because you promised me a palace. Turns out you can't even protect your own shack. Consider the wedding canceled. Pretend we never knew each other." With one harsh motion, Sarah kicked Daniel's suitcase out the door. "Take your stuff and get out. Never contact me again." The door slammed shut in his face. The lock turned. Daniel stood frozen in the sterile, empty hallway. At his feet lay the suitcase containing what remained of his life. He'd been discarded, thrown away like trash. The woman he'd betrayed Clara for had never seen him anything more than a walking ATM, and now the machine was broken. The pain of rejection somehow hurt more than losing the money. He felt hollow, stupid, completely alone. He had nowhere to go. His parents lived out of state, and he was too ashamed to admit his failure. His friends, high society friends, had only respected him as Clara's husband. Without status or money, he was nobody. Desperate, Daniel decided to try the only place he'd ever truly called home. Maybe Clara was gone. Maybe he could at least rest and think. He had no other option. Dragging his suitcase, he convinced another taxi driver to take him there, promising he'd pay upon arrival. Standing before the grand gates of the mansion, the familiar sight felt alien. He swiped his access card. A small red light blinked. Beep. Access denied. He tried again. Same result. Panic crept back in. He pressed the intercom. No answer. Again, louder. Still silence. He stared at the house. The large windows that once glowed warmly were now dark, curtains drawn tight. The house was dead to him, or more precisely, it had shut him out completely. The horrifying truth settled in. He had no money, no lover, no home. He was homeless, standing outside his own former palace, clutching a suitcase filled with clothes bought using the money of the woman he'd betrayed. The irony was cruel, perfect. He had nothing left. The honk of the taxi jolted him back to reality. The driver stepped out, clearly irritated. "So what's it gonna be, sir? The meter's still running. You paying or not?" Daniel emptied his pockets. Nothing. All his cards were useless pieces of plastic. His last cash was gone. Burning shame flooded his face. Just 24 hours earlier, Daniel Carter was drinking champagne on a rooftop. Now he couldn't pay for a cab. "My wallet must be missing. Can I leave my watch as collateral? It's expensive, worth more than the fare." He removed the watch, Clara's last birthday gift. The driver eyed it, then Daniel's desperate face. "No need, sir. I don't want trouble. Just unload your bags. Consider it charity." The pity in his voice felt more humiliating than an insult. The taxi drove off. leaving Daniel alone on the roadside with dust and shame. That night was the longest of his life. He called people he once called friends, men he treated to meals and drinks, who laughed loudest at his jokes. First call, Ron, his golf buddy, rejected after 2 rings. Second, Kevin, who often borrowed money from him. "Hey bro, bad timing. I'm out of town. Terrible signal. I'll call you later, yeah?" The line went dead. The lie was obvious. News of Daniel's downfall had spread fast. Who would associate with a failed con artist being sued by Clara Whitman, the respected business queen? Daniel had become poison. With what little strength he had left, he dragged his suitcase through the brightly lit streets. His heart felt darker than a starless night. Eventually, he ended up sleeping on the cold steps of a mosque among other homeless souls, a reality he could never have imagined. The next morning, starving and broken, he did the one thing he feared most. He called his mother. He told her a carefully edited version of the story, one where he was the victim of Clara's cruelty. Like any mother, she believed him. She cried. Then she sent a small amount of money, just enough for a bus ticket. The bus ride was torture. Packed into a hot, crowded economy bus, Daniel watched New York City skyscrapers fade into farmland and small towns. Every mile felt like a step backward, back to 0, maybe less. 8 hours later, he arrived at his parents' modest roadside house in a quiet American town, a place far from power, far from money, and painfully close to the truth. He was greeted by his mother's sobs and his father's look of quiet disappointment. The house of his childhood, once warm and comforting, now felt like a prison soaked in shame. Neighbors passing by slowed their steps, whispering as they glanced toward him. Yes, the successful son from New York City had come home as a failure. A few days later, the next disaster arrived in the form of an official letter. His mother received a summons from the New York City Police Department addressed to Daniel Carter. A fraud and document forgery report filed by Mr. Harrison had officially entered the legal system. At the same time, the notice for the first court hearing of Clara Whitman's divorce lawsuit arrived. The legal walls were closing in, tightening, ready to crush him completely. Daniel's father, a retired schoolteacher, was forced to drain his retirement savings to hire a cheap local attorney just to stand by his son. Daniel lived like a walking corpse. He locked himself in his room, refused to eat, haunted by regret and fear. He replayed his mistakes endlessly. Why had he been so greedy? Why had he been so stupid to trust Sarah? Why had he underestimated Clara? The questions spun day and night, torturing him without mercy. He missed his old life, not just the luxury, but the comfort. He missed Clara making him tea in the mornings. He missed their late-night conversations. He missed the sense of safety he felt by her side. All the things he once took for granted now felt priceless. One afternoon, a month after his humiliating return home, a small package arrived. It was addressed to him. There was no sender's name, only a post office address in New York City. Confused, Daniel opened it. His heart stopped. Inside was their silver wedding photo frame. The glass was cracked, shattered into hundreds of tiny pieces, but the photograph inside, the two of them smiling on their wedding day, remained intact. Lying atop the broken glass was a small note, written in handwriting he knew all too well. Clara's neat, elegant script. "This is what remains of the sandcastle you built on my suffering. Enjoy." Daniel collapsed onto the floor. The package was the final blow, shattering the last of his defenses. This was not a message of anger. It was an epitaph. A tombstone for their marriage, for his life. Clara was right. Everything he had wanted with Sarah, luxury, freedom, power, had been nothing more than a sandcastle, a fantasy built by destroying the solid bedrock that was Clara. Now the tide of truth had come, washing away every illusion, leaving him alone on a barren shore of regret. He stared at their wedding photo amid the shards of glass. Clara's face looked at him with love and hope, the same woman he had humiliated, betrayed, and discarded. Real tears finally fell. Not tears for lost money, not tears from fear of prison. These were tears for losing the only person who had ever loved him sincerely and built a world for him. He traded a diamond for broken glass, and now he would live forever with the wounds of those shards. In his small, silent room, Daniel finally wept uncontrollably, mourning the hell he had created with his own hands. A year passed. For some, time heals wounds. For others, it forges steel. For Clara, it was both. The betrayal left scars, but she had forged those scars into armor, making her stronger, wiser, and more focused. Her divorce from Daniel had been finalized months earlier. The court granted all her claims. With undeniable evidence of adultery and financial fraud, Daniel received not a single dollar from their shared assets. The luxury house and everything inside it became Clara's alone. Daniel was also ordered to repay all the money he had spent on Sarah from their joint account, a debt that would haunt him for years. His criminal case with Mr. Harrison was settled out of court. Daniel's devastated parents were forced to sell the only farmland inherited from his grandfather to repay the approximately $33,000 down payment just to keep their only son out of prison. The house that once felt like a stage set had now become Clara's private sanctuary. She completely redesigned it, removing any trace of Daniel. Dark, masculine tones were replaced with calming, bright colors. Daniel's rarely used office was transformed into a warm, personal library filled with books she loved. Her orchid garden grew lush and vibrant, blooming more beautifully than ever. The house now truly reflected her soul, elegant, strong, and full of life. Her business soared. Freed from the mental and financial burden of a parasitic husband, she poured all her energy into innovation and expansion. Her company launched a new app that revolutionized the industry. Her name became increasingly respected. She was no longer known merely as a successful career woman. She was recognized as a visionary. Yet her greatest achievement was not material. From the ashes of her suffering, Clara built something meaningful. She founded the Clara Dawn Foundation, a nonprofit providing legal aid and psychological support for women who are victims of domestic abuse, especially financial and emotional abuse. She turned her pain into power. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story not with hatred, but with wisdom, inspiring thousands of women to stand up and reclaim control of their lives. Clara found true happiness, not in having everything, but in becoming everything for herself and for others. On the other side of the world, in a dusty small town, Daniel lived the opposite fate. He existed in an eternity of regret. After all legal processes ended, he could no longer stay in his parents' house. The shame was unbearable. He rented a tiny room with the last money his mother gave him and began looking for work. No company would hire him. He had no special skills, and his name was stained. Eventually, he found a job as a parking attendant at a newly built luxury shopping mall. Every day, he stood under the scorching sun or pouring rain, blowing a whistle and directing luxury cars that belonged to other people. The irony slapped him daily. He spent his life managing other people's wealth, a constant reminder of everything he had thrown away. His once handsome, well-groomed face was now dull and sunburned. His charming smile had vanished, replaced by lines of exhaustion and despair. His charisma faded with his fortune. One scorching Saturday afternoon, a sleek black metallic sports car glided into the VIP parking area. The model stabbed Daniel's heart. It was the dream car he and Sarah once admired in brochures. With sluggish movements, Daniel blew his whistle and guided the car into a prime parking spot. The car stopped smoothly. Daniel approached, forcing the routine smile he no longer felt. The driver's window rolled down silently, and for the second time in his life, his world stopped. Behind the wheel sat Clara. She was more beautiful than he remembered. Her hair styled elegantly, her makeup flawless, designer sunglasses enhancing her aura of quiet power. She wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a kind-faced middle-aged man in a tailored suit. They were laughing softly, mid-conversation. Clara was in town to inaugurate a new branch of her foundation. Behind the dark lenses, her eyes flicked briefly toward Daniel. No shock, no anger, no hatred, no pity. Nothing. She looked at him the way one looks at a lamppost or a trash bin, something irrelevant. That complete indifference hurt 1,000 times more than any insult. Clara opened her wallet, took out a crisp $7, and handed it to him. "For the parking," she said calmly, the same tone she used with waiters or cleaning staff. Daniel stood frozen, his hands shaking too much to take the money. Clara grew slightly impatient. "Keep the change," she added firmly. She placed the bill on the guard post beside him, smiled at her companion, resumed their conversation, and rolled the window back up. The sports car glided towards the mall's main entrance, leaving Daniel standing motionless in the blazing parking lot. Daniel stared at the car disappearing into the distance, then at the $7 lying on the post, spare change from the woman he once humiliated over $330. He looked at his dirty, calloused hands and then at the grand mall where Clara had entered as a guest of honor. That was where karma became perfect. Clara no longer needed revenge. Life had done it for her. She had risen as a queen in her new kingdom, and Daniel was destined to remain forever at the gate, watching from afar, breathing in the dust of the success of the woman he once tried to destroy. He wasn't dead, but his life was over. He would spend the rest of his days in the hell he created himself, with regret as his eternal companion.